The convoy left Harwick Station at first light. 7 flatbeds loaded with reclamation parts and water treatment resin, and I was last in the column because the rig I drove, a wide-body Kellstrom hauler with a cracked secondary coolant line, couldn't push above 60 on the grade without the temperature gauge climbing into the red. That was my whole job on that run. Stay last, stay slow, keep the cargo cold. Ren Calvis, convoy mechanic, lowest seniority hire on the Ashfin relief circuit. Nobody's first pick, I was used to that. The Ashfin corridor is wilderness on both sides of the road for 140 kilometers. Spruce and fern moss taller than a man, the kind of green that looks black in fog. There had been a way station at kilometer 93 once, fuel depot and a comm relay, but the Drev'al land transfer disputes had shuttered it 3 years back. A collapsed roof, a rusted pump housing, concrete apron cracked through the middle by root growth. I knew the way station because I'd sheltered under its eave once during a hailstorm, eating a tin of cold bean soup and listening to ice ring off the metal housing. Not a place you'd choose, not a place anyone would stop. 6 trucks ahead of me passed it without touching their brakes. I saw why they didn't stop. There was a figure sitting on the concrete apron, back against the rusted pump housing, legs drawn in, head down in the rain. I pulled over anyway. I don't know exactly why. Training. Maybe. You don't leave a body on the side of a wilderness road, even when the body is breathing. Phew. I left the engine running and climbed down and walked to her through the rain with my jacket held over my head. Accomplished nothing except getting both the jacket and my head wet. She was Drev'al. That was clear before I was 10 feet away. The tawny bronze skin with its faint copper iridescence, the flat ear ridges instead of human ear cartilage, the face slightly wider across the brow than any human face. The Drev'al were the dominant species in this sector. We were the contractors. She already knew that better than I did. She was young. Not a child, not old. Close-shorn dark hair plastered flat with rain. Her clothes were functional, not poor. Traveling grays. Good boot construction. But she was soaked through, and her pack was open beside her, with the contents pulled out and left in the wet, the way a pack looks when someone has gone through it and taken what they wanted. Her eyes came up when I stopped. Deep green, the kind that shifts toward amber at the center. She looked at me, the way you look at something you have stopped expecting, I said. You hurt? She said, no. You've been out here through the rain? Since yesterday evening. I looked at the open pack. I looked at the broken reclaimer beside her. A small personal water unit, with the intake valve snapped off. Someone had snapped it deliberately. That kind of break doesn't happen from a fall. The foam-padded slot where a comm unit belonged was empty. I went back to the Kellstrom and got the emergency kit and the spare half-liter I kept in the cab. When I came back, she was exactly where I'd left her. I handed her the water first. She took it after a moment, the way people take things when they have decided they are no longer allowed to accept help. Their body overrules them. I crouched down in front of the broken reclaimer and had a look. The intake valve was a standard Kelmore threading, 40 millimeter. I had one in the kit. Not identical, but close enough. It took me 11 minutes with my multi-tool and a strip of thread seal tape. When I handed it back to her, it was working. She looked at it in her hands for a moment. Then she said, "Why?" Not a question. More like a word she was checking the weight of, I said. Because it was broken and I had the part. She looked up at me then, properly, the way she hadn't when I first approached. The rain was still coming down and I was kneeling on wet concrete. She said, "The other vehicles didn't stop. I know. I counted them. 6, 7 including mine." She absorbed that, she said. "I am cast out of my compound. That is the Drev'al term. Cast out. They took the comm unit. It was registered to the compound, so they had a right to it. Legally." She said that last word with a flatness that meant she understood very well what legally meant when applied to you by people who had decided you were no longer worth the space you occupied. I said, "Where are you trying to get to?" "Somewhere I'm not cast out of." I thought about that. I said, "I can get you to Caldwell Junction. That's the end of this run. Caldwell, you can pick up the outer circuit connector, all the way to Veth Crossing. And Veth Crossing has a Drev'al resettlement office. They're not your compound, but they can give you a temp tribe affiliation while you establish." She was quiet. I stood and looked out at the road while she thought about it. The rain was letting up at the tree line, she said. You don't know anything about me, I said. I know you were here by yourself in the rain since yesterday evening, and the 6 trucks ahead of me didn't stop. There was a pause. Then she said very quietly, my name is Soret, Ren Calvis, and we need to move. I've got a coolant line issue and I can't run the engine. Cold for long. She packed her things with the quick methodical movements of someone who has packed under worse conditions, and she was standing with the bag over one shoulder before I'd finished walking back to the cab. The cab was warm. She sat with her bag in her lap and looked straight ahead through the windshield at the road. Coming back into focus through the clearing rain. For about 20 minutes, neither of us said anything. The forest came and went on both sides. The temperature gauge stayed in the safe range, she said, without looking over. You know they won't acknowledge me automatically in Veth Crossing. A cast-out isn't eligible without documentation. There's a process, it can take months, I said. I know, and there are no guarantees. I know that too. She turned and looked at me. I kept my eyes on the road, she said. Then why are you taking me there, I said. Because you told me your name. I didn't mean it as a profound thing. I meant it the way I meant it. She had said her name, which meant she had decided to try again, and I wasn't going to make her regret that. But something shifted in her expression, very slightly, and she turned back to the road, and didn't say anything for a while after that. We caught up to the convoy past kilometer 112. Joel and Veth, convoy lead, built like a wall, approximately as communicative, came alongside on the radio at the next fuel stop. You picking up strays, Calvis? I said. Passenger. She's going to Caldwell. There was a pause. He said, clearance? I said, she's in my cab, Jolan. My cab, my call. Another pause then. Don't slow the column. I said, I won't. He clicked off. Soret had heard the whole thing. She was looking at her hands in her lap, and her expression was something I didn't have a Drev'al word for. Not gratitude exactly. More like the feelings of a door you believed was sealed being found. On closer inspection, simply unlocked. We made Caldwell Junction by late afternoon. I walked her to the transit board and showed her the connector schedule. The outer circuit ran every 3 days. Next departure at 6 the following morning. I told her the transit office had a voucher program for unaffiliated persons and that she should mention the relief circuit. She stood in front of the schedule. Then she said, you stopped. I said, I did. The others didn't. No, I did. She picked up her bag. She said, Avron Cass, the full name, if the resettlement office contacts the circuit. I said, Ren Calvis, 2nd level mechanic, truck 7. She almost smiled. There was a shift at the corner of her mouth, a compression, the kind that happens when something lands somewhere it hadn't expected to land. Then she turned and walked toward the transit office, and I stood in the yard with the diesel smell and the overhead lights coming on against the darkening sky. She had a straight back. She moved like someone who had remembered, somewhere around kilometer 112, that they had a name that meant something. 3 weeks later, I got a message through the circuit relay. No name on it, just a Veth Crossing origin code and 4 words. Affiliation confirmed. Temp granted. No signature. I didn't need one. I went back to check the coolant line.